This stunning vase is made from red Australian Coolibah Burl and epoxy. If you are wondering how it came to life, stay with me. I'll walk you through the whole process in this video. This is a piece of red Australian Coolibah Burl, one of the most visually striking and challenging woods I've worked with. The dense grain, the rich red tones, and those natural voids give it so much character. Coolibah is known not just for its beauty, but also for its hardness. It is one of the hardest wood species out there. I've already prepped a section of the burl log to fit my casting container, which is an 8-inch PVC pipe. To get it ready, I rough turned the piece between centers to shape it just enough for a proper fit. The final piece measures about 12.5 inches tall and 7.5 inches wide, fitting perfectly into the casting mold. First, I remove the remaining bark from the burl. I start by using a wire brush mounted on the lathe, which takes care of most of the loose bark quickly and efficiently. For the more stubborn sections, I switch to working by hand, using chisels and other sharp tools to carefully peel away what's left. Here you can see how I prepare the casting mold using an 8-inch PVC pipe. For the bottom of the mold, I'm using a piece of corrugated plastic sheet. I attach it to the PVC pipe by applying a bead of hot glue around the edge. I seal the inside bottom of the mold with weatherproof silicone to prevent any epoxy leaks. I reinforce the outside bottom with hot glue for an extra layer of protection. I'm going to pour almost 13 inches of epoxy, so I use deep casting epoxy for this project. I'm pairing the Coolibah Burl with dark emerald color epoxy to highlight its natural contours and bring out even more contrast in the final piece. After pouring the epoxy, I let it cure in the pressure pot for nearly 72 hours. Removing the casting from the mold can be a bit of a challenge and definitely takes some patience. First, I remove the bottom panel. Then, to release the epoxy from the PVC, I open up the pipe along a groove I had pre-cut earlier. With the help of a pair of old chisels and a bit of elbow grease, I slowly work the PVC away from the cured epoxy. Finally, the piece is fully released from the mold. Fortunately, there are no visible thermal cracks and the casting looks solid. First, I mount the piece between centers and begin turning the epoxy. The initial goal is to make the blank perfectly round and cut a temporary tenon on the end that will become the vase's opening. This piece is quite heavy, about 23 pounds, so I start at a moderate speed, around 500 RPM. As the shape becomes balanced and vibration is minimized, I gradually increase the speed to about 1000 RPM. In general, the speed you choose should depend on how stable the piece is on your lathe. For a blank this size and weight, I avoid going beyond 1000 RPM to keep things safe and controlled. Turning epoxy isn't exactly tool-friendly. It tends to dull edges quickly. That's why I primarily use carbide tools when working with epoxy. Here I'm shaping the temporary tenon. Its only purpose is to keep the blank perfectly centered while I prepare the opposite end and attach the main tenon block. Here I'm cleaning up the opposite end of the blank to prepare it for gluing the tenon block. Some turners have success using only hot glue, but for a piece this heavy, I prefer using regular wood glue for a stronger bond. I make sure to let it dry completely before mounting it on the chuck. I also reinforce the tenon block with hot glue. With the blank securely held in the chuck, I begin shaping the vase. I start by bringing it back to a perfectly round shape, then gradually increase the lathe speed to 1000 RPM. My initial cuts are fairly aggressive, which leaves the blank with some areas where the epoxy shatters. But as I get closer to the final shape, I switch to a smoother, shallower cuts for a cleaner finish. I frequently stop the lathe to check the condition of the cut and assess the shape as I go. Any areas where the epoxy has shattered can be smoothed out with scraper tools, making gentle, even passes. Finally, the outside shaping of the vase is complete and I am ready to move on to the hollowing phase. At this point, I am preparing the top of the vase to make it ready for hollowing. I begin by drilling a hole using 4 center drill bits, starting with a 1 1/4 inch drill bit and gradually working up to 2 3/4 inches. This gives me a clean starting point and helps establish the hollowing path. At this stage, I decided to shape the mouth of the vase and slightly widen the opening before switching over to the hollowing system. This gives better access and a cleaner starting point for the deeper cuts. This is my hollowing jig. It is the Clark Deep Hollowing System with a 1-inch bar, very sturdy. It is also equipped with a laser guide, which helps with valve thickness control. I start the hollowing process with a straight cutter to open up the center. Then I switch to a bent neck cutter to reach and shape the belly of the vase. Finally, I use a straight scraper to clean up the interior and smooth out the cuts. When the laser beam starts to elongate or disappear, it indicates that I'm getting close to the desired valve thickness. I switch to the scraper at the last stage of the hollowing. Finally, I shape the interior of the vase opening to match the overall form and ensure a smooth transition. With the cutting and shaping complete, I begin preparing the vase for finishing. The first step is filling any voids or small holes using CA glue. I use a mix of clear and dark CA glue depending on the surrounding color to achieve the best match. This filling process may need to be repeated a few times, both before and during sanding, to ensure a smooth and seamless surface. I let the CA glue dry for a few minutes before moving on to sanding. I start with a 40 grit sanding disc to level out the surface and remove any excess glue. Using the 40 grit sanding disc, I do the final shaping of the vase's lip to refine its form and smooth out any sharp edges. Now that the vase surface is smoothed out, I begin sanding the entire piece, starting at 40 grit and gradually working up to 180 grit. Since I plan to apply an epoxy top coat, I stop at 180 grit to maintain enough surface texture for a strong bond with the epoxy finish. The opening of the vase neck is wide enough for me to comfortably reach inside with my hand for sanding. If the opening were any smaller, this could become quite dangerous. I strongly recommend using caution and good judgment. Never attempt this if the opening is too tight, as it poses a serious safety risk. After sanding is complete, I clean both the inside and outside of the vase using denatured alcohol. The first finish I apply is a top coat of epoxy. Warming the epoxy in a bowl of warm water before application helps it flow more smoothly and evenly across the surface. For the inside of the vase, I pour the epoxy directly in and let it drain and self-level for about 10 to 12 minutes. For the outside of the vase, I mount it on a rotisserie motor to keep it turning slowly, ensuring an even coat. I apply the epoxy using a silicone brush, allowing it to spread smoothly as the vase rotates. To remove any surface air bubbles, I carefully pass a torch over the epoxy. Then I let the finish cure overnight while the vase continues to rotate on the rotisserie motor. I apply 2 coats of epoxy, sanding between coats to smooth the surface and ensure proper adhesion. After applying the top coat epoxy, I prepare the surface for the final finish by sanding it up to 220 grit, creating a smooth and even surface. For this project, I am using a tabletop finish from Clean Armor, a product I've recently started using and have been very pleased with. It cures in just a few minutes under UV light and buffs to a beautiful shine once cured. I start with the Wood 750 tabletop sealer. It helps fill any micro pores in the epoxy and prepares the surface for the final finish. After the sealer, I lightly sand the surface up to 220 grit to ensure a smooth base, then move on to the final coat. For this, I use Wood 757 tabletop finish from Clean Armor. In total, I applied 3 coats of sealer and 2 coats of top coat finish to the vase, building up a smooth, durable surface that really brings out the depth and character of the wood and epoxy. Once the top coat finish is fully cured under UV light, I sand the entire vase and gradually working up to 1500 grit for a smooth, polished surface. For buffing, I use Yorkshire grit abrasive paste, starting with the original to smooth out the surface, then moving to the microfine for a polished glass-like finish. I clean and sand the bottom of the vase, then apply the Clean Armor tabletop finish to ensure a consistent, durable finish all around. I give the entire piece a final buff with wax to enhance the shine and add an extra layer of protection. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the future builds. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.